Kaya, and welcome you tonight here to Tannock Hall and welcome up for the first DesignFreo Conversation where X marks the spot. A little bit different to how we had envisaged our first event, but here we are, and I'm glad to see you all. I'm Pippa Hurst. I am the DesignFreo Chair, and I'd like to start by welcoming the Honourable Simone McGurk, Member for Fremantle, the Honourable David Honey, Member for Cottesloe, the Honourable Alison Zaman, Member for the North Metropolitan Region. We have apologies from Lisa O'Malley and from Josh Wilson, who were coming but have been caught up in other events. We also welcome Brad Pettit, Mayor of Fremantle, and the local councillors who we have in the audience tonight: Rachel Pemberton, Andrew Sullivan, Frank Moffelin, Jenny Archibald, Sue Broom, Maria Busick, Hannah Fitzharding and Aidan Lang. And of course, no less important, I welcome everyone here in the room, and I thank you for your interest in the future of this special place where we're privileged to live on beautiful Noongar. And I welcome Brendan Moore to Welcome to Country.
Thanks, Pippa. Kaya, Nija Kwaba Buja, Nija Nan Mora Buja, Wanju Nija Waila Nunga Buja, Nija Bilia Nija Gurus Buja, and Yira Del Yirigan Muru Yalagongas Buja. So I've just said welcome to our country, and I'm the descendant of an ancestor named on the Wajak claim, whose name was recorded as Tommy Nettle, and he was part of Yalagonga's country. So technically, I'm not in my my sort of blood group part of Wajak, but nevertheless it's all part of the Wajak claim. So I'm also I work here at the City of Fremantle, so we have a reconciliation action plan, and that recognises the traditional owners, and usually I don't get an opportunity on behalf of my family to do the welcome, so I'd like to thank you very much, and I hope we have a wonderful debate.
Thank you very much, Brendan. I just wanted to do a quick introduction to DesignFreo. We're an independent, not-for-profit that provides a platform for conversations about design. And broadly speaking, we're interested in how design can make our lives better. Fremantle has a thriving and growing design community. We have designers working across all disciplines and scales in the physical and in the digital realm. And so we want to celebrate our local design talent and also encourage a wider conversation about why design matters. In the face of a climate emergency and now a pandemic, it's never been more important to question the way that we do things and to reframe the usual in business as usual. Good design is critical to our future, and we think that our own community is the place for us to start and be the change we want to see. We encourage you to visit our website and sign up to our mailing list so you can be informed about our future events, and we hope that they'll be a little more welcoming. And so our very first DesignFreo Conversation, Old Bridge, New Bridge. The things that we build and the things that we knock down reflect what we value as a society. And nowhere is that writ larger than in public infrastructure. Our intent with this event is purely to share information. Main Roads intends to go out for community consultation in the near future on the design for the replacement for the existing traffic bridge. And so we did invite them to come along tonight. They declined to come, but they have sent us an email and encouraged everyone to sign up on their website to receive information about this project as it progresses. So we've assembled a great panel here tonight with knowledge on the issues that should inform the design of the new traffic bridge. And understanding the constraints and opportunities is necessary for all of us to assess what is presented when Main Roads does actually release something for us to look at. and it's also important for us to be able to contribute to that process, to the design process. We really embrace the idea of a new bridge as a rare opportunity to create something with real design merit that we can all be proud of. And we're also interested in exploring what happens to the old bridge and whether that can be reimagined as something else that will add value to our community. Fremantle has a reputation for leading by example. Could Fremantle have the world's first carbon positive bridge? Maybe. Let's aim high and let's embed the word design firmly in our city's creative identity. Before I hand you over to Mary, I'd like to thank DesignFreo's founding sponsor ICS for their generous support of our new organisation. We thank our event sponsors, the Fremantle School of Architecture, whose work you may have seen out in the foyer, and the School of Arts and Sciences here at the University of Notre Dame. We thank our other event sponsor, who is appropriately the Old Bridge Sellers. Pick up a wonderful magazine from our friends at Fabric Quarterly on your way out. Based on that, I think we probably should have increased the ticket price. And thanks to our photographer Kai and our film crew, Elaine and Richard, who have generously donated their time to record tonight's proceedings. And to the DesignFreo team, and in particular to Leila Saliba, without whom this would never be happening. Leila wants it on the record that she had no discretion over this evening's spatial design or furniture selections. A bit of housekeeping. Obviously, we're adhering to the university's health regulations, which puts their students first, so thank you very much for your help and understanding on that level. When we leave, we need to exit through that door, and the toilets are also out that way. So it's with pleasure that I now hand you over to Mary and our panellists to get the conversation underway.
Much and to DesignFreo for inviting me to chair this event. What we're going to do is take the first hour to have the conversation with the panellists, and then in the second half hour we'll throw to the audience for any questions that you want to put to our experts. I know this is an area of great passion for you, and particularly people who've bothered to come tonight, but do treat this as a conversation. As you know, we don't as yet have anything from main roads, and this situation is a complex one for those of you who are at all familiar with it. What we have is a bridge that was built in 1939 and was meant to only have a relatively short life. Millions have been spent on shoring it up over time. And now it's time for a long-term solution. The tide is fast there, it's a dangerous place for maritime navigation, and it's something that really needs to be dealt with. We are waiting, as Pippa said, for Main Roads to make their plans public. But despite what has been undertaken in terms of community consultation, it appears that the general feeling is that not enough community consultation has happened up until this point, and people feel that they may be presented with a design that's already so far down the track that any kind of community consultation from here onwards is really a formality. So that's part of the reason why it's good to have this conversation prior to these plans actually being in front of us. Now, what I've decided to do is ask each panel member to just spend 2 or 3 minutes introducing their perspective on this conversation, and then we'll get on with it after that. But let me do some quick intros first of all. State Labor Member for Fremantle, the Honourable Simone McGurk, MLA, Minister for Child Protection, Women's Interests, Prevention of Family and Domestic Violence and Community Services. Welcome. Rebecca Clarkson is a community development expert and instigator of the Change.org campaign to retain the Old Bridge as a public space, which now has almost 2,500 signatures. 2,499. Somebody. Russell Kingdom, architect and city maker, manager of city design and projects at the City of Fremantle. Welcome. Brendan Moore, you've met, Wajak Noongar traditional owner and Aboriginal engagement officer at the City of Fremantle, and Dr. Anthony Duckworth-Smith, research fellow at the Australian Urban Design Research Centre. Rebecca, would you like to kick off?
Sure. I come to this discussion with a background in community development and stakeholder engagement, and essentially this means providing the physical and social or digital infrastructure for people to meet people. So be that parks or the Fremantle Arts Centre or the library, it's all about managing and maintaining and enabling people to connect in very simple ways. Through this experience, I've noticed how fundamental high quality public space is to developing communities. So good quality spaces encourage active transport, they support local businesses, they provide a platform for activity. They create good cities and places, and they encourage people to take care of their cities and places. They enrich everyone's health and well-being. I think Enrique Penaleso, one of the former mayors of Bogota, is famous for saying that everyone is equal in public space. So be it a billionaire or a homeless man on the corner, we are all just one person when we're walking next to each other. So, and it's for that reason, I guess, that we didn't just build a car park around Perth Stadium. They landscaped the place beautifully and put in gorgeous playgrounds and lovely public art, so that if you didn't have the money to go and buy a ticket to see the footy, you could actually still be outside in a pleasant surrounding and be part of the atmosphere. I spent time working over at the City of Melbourne under the Director of Design, Rob Adams, and it was there that I realised that to create good public space, it is designed with strategic intent. So it doesn't just happen. And opportunities for great public space, like the Fremantle Traffic Bridge, a reinvention of, doesn't come often, and it's really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So when I heard the City of Fremantle had proposed this, transforming the Fremantle Traffic Bridge into a Highline style plaza for walking and cycling, for dolphin spotting, for fishing, to just amble along looking at the Fremantle Port in the setting sun, it got me really excited. It's this kind of innovative and creative thinking that I really love. The Fremantle Green Line could be an amazing place for riding, for events, for celebrations, or just to sit and stare on the horizon. And we don't have anything like it in WA, and neither is there anything like it across Australia. I could really imagine taking my family to this place for fish and chips on a sunny Sunday afternoon when the wind hasn't come in and it's just that lazy kind of salty air, and just spend time there. Walk across to Mojo's, attend festivals. So I really do want a world-class gateway to the CBD, and I really think that this is a perfect opportunity for us to create something. I want to live in a city where urban design students come to my city to study, and to study a case study that we've done, not just looking at importing overseas examples. I'm really disappointed to find that this is essentially being ruled out for a variety of reasons, from engineering to maintenance to costings, all those kind of reasons that good projects never get to the ground. And it also brings my other passion in, which is community engagement, involving people in the decisions that will affect them. So in 2011, there was some great engagement done around the bridge, and there was really great reimagining and a setting of a criteria to create a new bridge. And that was clearly just used for a funding application, because the funding came in and the conversation stopped. And then the broader conversations around the Fremantle Port and how people move north to south around Perth have been completely disregarded in this. So I don't want to let main roads, and I think Councillor Sullivan said, I don't want to let main roads to dictate the design of our cities around, and particularly dictate the design of Fremantle. It's happened too long, and we've ended up with terrible intersections and horrible places to look. So this is an opportunity which should not be road-led. It should be created as a place with feedback and stakeholders from all avenues, and also include all the different and very relevant stakeholders that actually use that space and use that bridge. So that was the impetus for setting up a petition, and the impetus for starting to build a coalition of the willing, of people who thought that this is possibly a really good idea. And maybe if it's not the be-all and end-all, that we could at least have a broader conversation about what we want our gateway into Fremantle to look like.
Dr. I'll throw to you next.
Thanks, Mary. And I think this is on. I think to echo some of the sentiment from Rebecca, I think the idea of having a world-class, I think perhaps I've used that term, but a world-class bridge is really important. I think we need a great gateway. Fundamental to that, from my point of view, is public realm. I think I fully agree. I think that the public realm is the key to this. It's more than an engineering project. It needs to be more than an engineering project, and I think Fremantle deserves that. But before we kind of get into the perhaps the nuts and bolts of the design of the bridge, or the retention and how much of the old, just like to broaden the conversation a little bit to see what we've got behind us, because the City Council has actually looked at this fairly recently, been equally frustrated with the lack of information, I guess, would be fair to say. And one of the key things that we are asking main roads to do is to is to look at it in that broader strategic frame. A lot of people in the room would be aware of the Curtin Avenue project and its alignment and second alignment that gets tossed around, whether there's going to be a flyover just south of the North Fremantle train station. So there's some big questions to be asked, I think, strategically, that set the frame around what this project is. Now, you're never always going to have all those strategic answers in place for any project I've been involved in terms of civic infrastructure projects for 30 years. You never get all those strategic questions answered, but at least you've got to ask them and get the best answers that you can. And at the moment, we think that's there's a bit of a hole there. So besides the Curtin Avenue question, of course the big elephant in the room is the port. What is going to happen to the port? What will that do in terms of port access, freight access, whether or not Curtin Avenue will be for freight, or is it going to be for cars? If the North Fremantle side ultimately gets developed to a residential area, you're looking potentially at 30,000 people there. Half of them are driving their cars to Perth, that's a lot of cars. So you need to look at that slightly broader frame, because this bridge is going to be around for 100 years. So you kind of got to get it right. I think I saw a comment from Councillor Aiden that we get one chance to get this right. I couldn't agree more. At some point, you've still got to make a decision to build a bridge and do something. The money is there, so the pressure is going to be on to get those strategic questions answered to the best that they can. So the council passed a resolution asking for those questions to be resolved. It also talked about alignment and connection, and to me, some critical bits of infrastructure that isn't just about a bridge, it's about the railway, and if there is another railway bridge to access the port, it's not just about port access, it's also about maintaining the passenger rail service to Fremantle, and should that service need to grow in the future, it needs its own dedicated tracks separate from freight. So even if freight was to go long-term with the port relocation, you still need a really strong rail system going into the city. So that needs sorting out as well. Bicycles, there's a PSP that's coming all the way down from Perth. That needs to connect to Fremantle excuse me, in a seamless way with a fast route to it. We've got a bicycle plan at Fremantle, and it really starts teasing out the different styles of cycling. You have fast commuter cycling, then you have the slower speed cyclist bit like me, where you've got your box on your back and you buy a loaf of bread, and you go along almost at the pace of pedestrians. So there's different types of cycling that need to be layered into this design. That is not easy, and for the fast cyclists, you don't really want to mix that with pedestrians. So there's a few modes of transport you've got to pull apart as part of that design challenge. Ultimately, excellence in design is something that we would all want to see. This is an important gateway. It will be the brand of Fremantle as you enter into it. It's got to be really good. How much of the traffic bridge gets preserved, I think, will be probably a real focus of the topic conversation tonight. But the council has made a resolution to say keep as much as you can, especially on the southern side. So that is the current city's position. Forgive me for referring to these notes, but I think it's important because I think the council resolution was very clear what it wanted from Mayor. As well as trying to dictate exactly the design of the bridge, these are the values and important principles that we want the bridge design to respond to. So that's what we're hoping we will see when that design comes through. Public realm is super important. If we can get more space around the naval stores building on Canning Highway, that would be a big bonus. Importantly, the pedestrian connections, that it's not just about getting across the river, it's getting down to the foreshore. And both sides of the foreshore, in my opinion, are appalling. They are really poor. Catherine Ash at Notre Dame University did some work with the students last semester. That's out of the foyer. We were looking at what that foreshore could be. It's a beautiful piece of work. Really, if it's still up afterwards, then please go and see it. So these are the bigger picture questions I think we need to answer. The council's also been really clear that it's asked Main Roads to put at least 2 options out there for real discussion and engagement, and to do it as soon as they can, because clearly in an ideal world that would have been out before this forum. So we've actually got some plans we can discuss. So it's really important that we get that engagement process going. And then the city is looking towards events like this and other parts of the engagement process to hear what the community feels before it makes its final decision I might park it there. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Russell. Brendan.
I looked at a communique the other day, and it was, and I looked at it quickly. I think probably a bit too quickly. It was called the Swan River, and I just thought I misread it. I thought it was the Swan River colony, but it was the Swan River crossing. So interesting, because I think the old bridge was built such a long time ago that we've moved on from the 30s so much now that Aboriginal interests and particularly heritage sites, the Heritage Act was only 1974.
Sorry, Brendan, could you move up on the mic a bit, please? We're struggling to hear you.
Sorry. I was just saying that the Heritage Act, Aboriginal Heritage Act, is 1974, and we've moved on a long way, at least in recognising Aboriginal heritage. And Council's been pretty clear that, that first of all it supports the federal and state funding commitment of 230 million for the Swan River crossing project, but also clear that the Aboriginal significance of the river crossing location is clearly understood, respected and interpreted in the design and deliverables. This could be a major component of the Percent for Art program associated with this project. And I heard Rebecca mention the Perth Stadium project, which I've been involved in during the planning stages, where we did have that Percent for Art scheme, but it was probably the involvement in talking to the architects and designers that we're able to have the arbour built, which, if you look from the sky, and that's not part of the public art, but it was built to pretty much mimic and copy the wattle. So often in the engagement, some of the dynamic rather than the static advantages of consultation can work as well, and that's definitely something that the council has decided or has agreed upon in its decision to make sure that Aboriginal heritage is included. And this area that we're talking about is a very significant area for Aboriginal people. I mean, within the city of Fremantle, there's 3 registered Aboriginal sites: the Swan River and Cantonment Hill, or what we say Tuerta Wirrana, are 2 of them. So it's really smack bang in the middle of sort of a very significant, two very significant Wirrana sites, Wajak sites, and I was invited to the Notre Dame architecture students to talk to architecture students while they're studying, so that they can grab hold of what's left of stories and culture, and to identify that and to use some themes out of that when they're building structures. And I think that hasn't happened before. And I don't know whether it happens with engineers, and probably it can do, but I definitely think that there's so many opportunities. I mean, as I mentioned in the welcome, north of the river was Yalagonga's country, and south of the river was Midjiguru's country. And even today we sort of have a sense of ownership of, do you live south of the river or do you live north of the river? It was significant culturally, it was significant regionally, it was significant politically, and also it's very significant from a defence sort of point of view as well, where people would stand on top of the Tuerta Wirrana and you can see for miles around. But that identity or that ownership of land, and I've been involved with the South West Aboriginal Land and Sea Council as a director and on the Wajak Working Party, and incidentally I was at a working party yesterday where we had finally been consulted, and a lot of that is probably due to the COVID, but we are being consulted as traditional owners for for this construction of the bridge, and so it's also interesting, I think, from a point of view that, you know, that Perth really just has two crossings, you know, the Narrows and here. And if you go back in history, Noongar's had two crossings, they had one here and one up towards Mayvans, out the back there. It's sort of near Murrugurra, where the Murrugurra Bridge is. But, you know, getting back to the ownership, you know, I think that story hasn't been told enough, and the story that probably a lot of people have been told may not be the correct one about Midgegroo, for example. But, you know, I think there's a good reason why that story hadn't been told, because, you know, for the most part of the settlement of this state, Aboriginal ownership of land wasn't recognised until, you know, the Mabo decision in '92. So I think it's a place in Fremantle, and it's time to be able to recognise both sides of the river in the way it used to and the way it is today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, it's good to be here, and can I acknowledge that as well, Molila, the traditional owners of the land where we meet, and the many elected members who have come along today. People can hear me okay?
Yeah.
But I noticed there were a few acknowledgements, including David Honey, but I can't see him here. Usually stands out, he's quite tall, but Alison Zamon has come along here today, so I acknowledge her, and Brad Pettit is the Mayor, and a number of elected representatives as well. Look, in some ways I was a little cautious about coming along because I won't be able to address some of the engineering issues that I know are informing Main Roads thinking about this project, and I have urged them and through the Minister's office that they need to start going out and talking to people about what those constraints are and why those constraints exist. And if they're defendable, then they'll be able to defend them, and we'll be able to defend them. If they're not, we need to try and, if there are good reasons why they can be challenged, let's hear what they are. So my understanding is that Main Roads will do initially some drop-in sessions where people can come along and hear what their plans are or what their constraints are around the project. And then after that start some more involved consultations. And one of the challenges is that, one of the reasons that we've got the money for this project is partly because, and I thought it might be worth just going through a bit more detail, but essentially the previous government started to throw good money after bad in terms of maintaining or repairing the traffic bridge, and it became obvious to us in government through the Minister Rita Sapiotti and Main Roads that you had to stop just putting more and more money into the repairs, that the bridge needed to be replaced, and it was prioritised with Infrastructure Australia. Now we have a budget of 230 million to replace the bridge, and so that will be 50% state and 50% federal, and it does include another rail bridge. And the reason many of you are probably aware that we included the rail bridge is so that at the moment we have one rail crossing and that's shared by freight and passenger lines, and that restricts therefore the ability to put more freight on rail coming out of the port. So as Mary mentioned, the current bridge was built in 1939 and is well past its use-by date, and there were successive engineering reports, including one from 2004, which talked about the risk of collapse of the report. In fact, there was quite a bit of publicity about it because some of the quotes from those reports were quite concerning. And essentially it's the footings that are a problem, that they have been fragile for a while. There's been some shoring up of the bridge, but my understanding is that the real risk is sort of at the bottom if there was some sort of blow or impact to the footings. And so the previous Labor government under Alan Carpenter and Jeff Gallop allocated $80 million in forward estimates to replacing the bridge, but we lost government in 2008. And amongst his more notorious missteps, Troy Buswell stripped that allocation from the state budget, and money was allocated under the Barnett government to do some repairs to the bridge, I think over $20 million. So quite a bit of money on repairing the bridge. As I said, since we've been in government, there's been some more money on repairs, but essentially it was realised that we really needed to replace it, and it was prioritised in terms of the state asks to Infrastructure Australia, and the federal government allocated their share of 115 million, and we've allocated our share as well. And there was already a move to expedite that work to try and get it done, but particularly with COVID and the priority to try and get money out to keep people working, etc., this project has been fast-tracked, and I guess people are feeling frustrated by the fast-tracking of the project. I wouldn't say it's just because of COVID, but out of main roads work, people are keen to get moving on it. I understand that people want good design out of this project and want to be involved, and I've made this point to Rebecca when I've met with her, and Mary and I were talking about this project about tonight, and I was making the point that I can't guarantee that people will get everything they want out of the project, but I think we need to let the conversation develop, and people need to hear what main roads constraints are from their point of view. I know the city has some insight into that because of the discussions that have happened so far. And to hear what main roads parameters are for their work. And if we're able to accommodate people's views, and main roads can good. If they can't, then we can escalate it to myself. We've got Josh Wilson, the federal member, whose seat includes North Fremantle, so my state seat stops at the river. And I know there are concerns by some of the North Freo residents about how this will impact them, particularly those that live just on the north side of the river, and whether this is going to have any impact on the North Freo sort of town centre there around Mojo's and the like. My understanding is that it won't, but let's hear if it will. But you've got Josh representing both sides of the river in his seat. You've got myself, I've got some voice here as a local member, and also I guess as a cabinet minister. I'll be able to represent those views, and you've got Lisa O'Malley too. And if you're looking at it in a kind of purely political way, she's a marginal seat. We've got a state election coming up, so people are pretty opportune around that time. But I did think it was worth making the point that if you look at main roads aren't always the best at understanding how people interact with road design. I was joking to Mary that I've got a small reservoir of jokes, and one is that main roads are kind of on the spectrum sometimes. They sort of perhaps not prefer to deal with people so much as just have them road designs. But if we look at what happened with High Street, so before the Perth Freight Link announcement came about, there was a proposal, and many of you were involved in these debates, there was a proposal to upgrade Stirling Highway and High Street. And this was when Troy Buswell was Roads Minister, and I think he was Parliament Treasurer at the time, but there was a proposal that that intersection was going to be much, much larger. It's a much larger curve, the speed of around, so people are aware where I'm talking about, where Stirling Highway hits High Street, the old Mustang, was where the roadworks are happening now. That was going to be, the trucks were going to be able to do at least 60 k's around that bend. It was going to take a lot more of the community kind of housing out around that area, and it was going to be 6 lanes wide. So it was a much wider road reserve, and there were going to be big retaining walls. It's the way that they were going to run the design. And people were very angry about the scale and the lack of community consultation around that. I can see someone in the audience there shaking his head, he might have liked that, but the majority of feedback that I was getting through my office, and I know it was the view of the city as well, that this was far too big and an overstretch for that intersection. But Main Road said this is the way it has to be, we're not going to shift and went through. And eventually, the city used its trump card, I guess, its veto over the A-class reserve change to the golf course straight, that particular development, as it was. The freight link kind of overtook, the freight link proposal kind of overtook that road design. Fast forward to 2017 when we labelled that there's a change in government, and we said that we won't do the freight link, but we will upgrade that intersection, but we will listen to what the city and what the residents want with that road upgrade. And not everyone's got what they want. I know there's been some cutting down of trees and a little bit of frustration, but I would say on feedback that I have got through my office and talking to people that 85–90% of what people wanted out of that road upgrade, they wanted more pedestrian access, an extra pedestrian access, they wanted as many of the trees retained as possible. 70% of the trees have been retained. There's been consultation about the design, and we've got there because you've got a different government, you've got people, local representatives who are able to kind of manage, yes, we are going to upgrade this road, and these are the constraints, and we'll try and manage that. I'm hopeful, and I will do whatever I can to make sure that your voice is heard in the design of the new bridge. And as I said, we may not get everyone's views incorporated, but we'll do what we can. And we have got a very proud community, a community that's very proud and committed to good outcomes, not only in terms of design. Of course, everyone wants good design. It's sort of everyone wants it. I guess everyone's interpretation of what good design is might be something else. But we want this is an opportunity to have good interaction between people and the crossing, the kind of issues that Brendan raised. This is a perfect opportunity to try and incorporate some of those issues if we can. And I hope as a government, we're trying to do what we can to incorporate that. I don't know whether we did some of the design around the stadium or whether it's the previous government, but we made the decision to name Meadowgarra Bridge Meadowgarra because there is not enough naming of Meadowgarra is what we think of as Harrison Island. If there's opportunities to do that, I would like to incorporate some of those past, tens and tens of thousands of years that have been present in for Aboriginal people, for Maori people around that area. I think we can do it.
I might just stop you there, Minister, if you don't mind, because I haven't even had a chance to ask Anthony.
It's an occupational hazard. So I hope I'm saying we will try and incorporate people's views, let Main Roads do some consultations, some discussions with people about what their constraints are, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you very much. Dr. Anthony Duckworth-Smith, you've been working on this project for 10 years on and off. What's your perspective in this conversation?
Thank you to the previous speakers for sharing their views. So I represent the Australian Urban Design Research Centre, which is a research centre attached to the University of Western Australia. I've been involved in this project professionally as an urban designer for about 10 years, initially working with Main Roads to try and influence the design and even how they approach the design by introducing thoughts about place and about what this significance of this place might be and how that might become interpreted or translated into their design process. So that was initially done in 2011. I worked with the city. There were representatives from the city and from Main Roads and from engineering who were involved in that process. So we tried to impress upon the authority what the design approaches might be suitable for that location. I should also qualify that I worked for Main Roads when I graduated. This is in another lifetime, to be honest. Before I studied design and architecture, I was an engineer and I worked for Main Roads And I've also worked for bridge engineers as well in professional capacity. So this project is like the confluence of my entire career. I'm really interested in it, and I have been interested and motivated to try and influence the project towards good design outcomes. So in the last year, I was engaged by Main Roads again to provide some urban design context for the latest design, or the latest series of design interventions that are going to be done on the bridge. So I've been working last year to provide that information to try and present the case again for a place-based approach to this design. And I'd just like to reiterate the Minister's points that it's not just a traffic bridge. The project is called the Swan River Crossings, and I think that was acknowledged by Brendan. And it's actually a series of crossing decisions that need to be made. There's the traffic, there's the pedestrians, there's the cyclists, there's the freight rail, and there's the passenger rail. And they all come down to that tiny location that we've got that's sort of sandwiched between the port and the residential area on the north. So what we have is a very complex concentration of constraints at one particular location. And over the years, it's taken a while to get my head around what those constraints are, but also to try and promote the opportunities of this site and this location in that regard. So I suppose tonight I can provide some advice to the community around what those constraints, what my knowledge is about this project, so that when there are some actual propositions in front of you, you hopefully will have some information that will allow you to give a good critique or a good assessment of that information. I think when I've looked at this project, and my experience with Main Roads and working with Main Roads is that they're very good at their job. Main Roads, they're exceptionally good at what they do, and that is to deliver transport functionality, and that has always been their objective, and they've been really successful at that and all over the state and the city. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have the idea of this is a public infrastructure and it's public realm. So there's a sense of needing to have a place-based response as well, and I don't think there's many other sites that warrant that more than this site, because of some of the things that Brendan said, but also just in terms of it's always been that kind of ceremonial entrance to the city. And it's a gateway, it's a threshold, it's everything that a bridge can address as a piece of design. So I feel like there is a responsibility to do something here that is appropriate to the place. And I'm here to encourage you and also to provide you with some information. Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony. Since the conversation is called Old Bridge, New Bridge, I think we should start by talking about the Old Bridge, a state-registered asset. Are you getting feedback out there from this microphone?
Tiny bit.
Is it all right? Or should I swap? I can swap to the other one.
It's fine.
And I want to ask about, with a state-registered asset, it's problematic because you have to deal with something it's precious, even if it's dangerous, and all the other, complex issues that we have with the structure and the engineering itself. Can we and should we keep the old bridge, Anthony?
So I probably know too much about it to be able to give a creative opinion. It's, from my understanding, and I take the point about the opportunity for a public realm and infrastructure. It's a timber bridge. It's made, and it's not a robust bridge. So I know that it has quite a lot of complications in terms of the foundations and a 70-year-old timber bridge in its location. I've also been on the harbour master's pilot boat, and they've shown me how difficult it is to navigate. And essentially, when you have the tidal race there, you have to basically line the boat up in between the pylons of 2 bridges, and then you've got a gun to get through, so that you can hold the alignment. So you're not only travelling at speed next to some pretty fragile structures. So then I take the point about risk and collapse, and I know there'll be that sort of assessment made. It is a lovely thing, and it has qualities in and of itself. So my feeling is that the principles of having a public realm and having a good crossing and a celebratory environment or something are great. Whether or not that involves retaining the existing bridge, I think the conversation should be open to say, how do we best achieve these principles given this project? Because there's a fantastic opportunity to have something that really connects those 2 sides of the river for all the people who are not in a vehicle. I think that should be a really strong focus on this project.
Thank you. Rebecca, I know that you're really passionate about retaining the old bridge, but I also know from reading the stuff that you've written that you're a pragmatist about what some of the issues are. So how deeply do you hold the conviction that we should keep the old bridge?
There is a spectrum, of course, and people get stuck in binaries, so we have to do this or this. And there is a really long spectrum, and I think it is the role of the community to really lob that ball out there and advocate as strongly as possible for the best outcome, because there will always be negotiations to be had. And there's also creativity in the solutions to maintain the best part of the bridge or best part of the bridges, and look at other ways of connecting 2 parts of a whole. But yes, I mean, the river does go through there fast. There's some crazy drivers out there, and I think there's at least 3 or 4 accidents a month underneath. So there is some real, as he said, real constraints. But there's real opportunity amongst those constraints. And there's real value that needs to be placed on much more than just the bitumen that crosses that place. Yeah.
Brendan, I want to ask you, because you were talking to me about how, well, you've mentioned it today as well, about how this is a registered site, the Swan River in that area, and about the story of the Waggle, and about how all of those pylons in the river are potentially problematic. Can you explain that a little bit further? You probably need to get right up to the microphone too.
Yeah, probably, although it's not, I mean, the usual sort of venue is at a working party where there'll be up to 30 people like me that have been elected from their families to comment on these matters, and we're probably better off commenting than talking about architectural embellishments that we need to protect, which is equally important. But definitely, and that's obviously the council's view that those embellishments need to be protected, particularly at the southern end, the European heritage. And I live in a limestone heritage listed house as well, so, European listed house. But no, the feeling amongst many of my colleagues would be that the Waggle have impeded the flow, and obviously, you know, the hydrology of the river has changed so much, and the salinity, and obviously the limestone bar that was across the river at the crossing point. But still, interestingly, the Swan River's been able to hang on to its significance as a spiritual site, as opposed to, for example, a archaeological site where you'll get tangible artefacts. And so we've pretty much also been told that if we were to not continue the custom of respecting the Waggle and performing a ritual, that it'll be hard to also keep that site as a mythological registered Aboriginal site on the register. And it does create a bit of a problem with some of the legislation, because it's a bit cumbersome, because it means that any time that someone wants to put in a boat pen or something and they're disturbing the, some of the beneficial layer of the river, they have to get a section 18. But we've got, anyway, we chew the fat sometimes for way too long in these meetings, and we would often, or sometimes we would settle on sort of a regulation 10, which is a bit not so cumbersome as the section 18, but that's really not my place to, as one person's view, we all make a collective decision.
So does that mean that ideally then there wouldn't be as much disruption in the river in terms of the structure of the bridge itself? That would be preferable?
Arguably, yeah, that's right. So our preference is for less structures in the river.
And is there a problem? I think this is the 4th bridge that's been built in that location. Am I right? I think it's 4th, yeah. And so over that time, obviously, and this is why you talked about the stories of Yellowgonga and Midjaguru, because they were I'm guessing they were the leaders on the north and south side of the river at the time when the first bridge was built. So was it?
Well before that.
Oh, okay. So was it a problem that a bridge was built there at all?
Well, for them, arguably. I mean, there's a lot of water under the bridge since then. But as I said before, we've got this ancient culture and this registered site. So actually, it was interesting. I was down at the I think it's the Main Street jetty that I'm ripping that out, or somewhere south of the river, and I was showing people how they could respect the wild, even if you don't believe in it, you can still respect it, and throw some sand into the river. And there were some ducks, and they came along, and then the team threw their water, and then all of a sudden these birds started coming in. And I talked about spirituality, and one of the people came up and said, "Oh, is that a sign?" I said, "No, I think they think they're being fed bread." So I'm probably, I'm a pragmatic person, but also respectful of that ancient history and culture of mine that we need to keep connections to. So I thought what the question was.
No, well, it was basically about if it was problematic for a bridge to be there at all, in the sense that it's a sacred site.
Oh look, it'll still be a sacred site, whether there's a bridge there or not.
Right. Russell, you're across the engineering probably as much as anyone on the panel. What do you think about retaining the old bridge? Is it possible?
I really can't answer that from a technical point of view. In fact, the point I was going to make, Mary, is that this is something which I think we're lacking, is information. I put through phone calls to main roads. I asked them, you say it's structurally unstable. Where are those reports? So I don't know if you've actually got copies of it, but I think this is a critical part of the information that's missing. I mean, if it took $200–300 million to rebuild it, restore it, to put it back into some kind of use, I'd still question what that use is. I think there's a debate here about place activation, but that aside, I think technically we need to know what is its cost to do that, and then is it something we should be doing, and then how much of it. Certainly the council's position at the moment is to retain as much as possible. It's a default position, but we need that information, I think, on the table to make to make sensible decisions, noting that this is going to be a big collection of 4 bridges. We've got a new rail bridge, an old rail bridge, a PSP that needs to be tacked onto one of the bridges, a new road bridge, and potentially retention of an old. Now, that could get messy. So I think we need to really look at that. A piece of work I saw that Anthony did 5 years ago, which I really loved, was the idea of bundling a lot of these modes together, so there was one strong statement, but of crossing. It was really beautiful. Now, I'm not sure if that retained a lot of that existing bridge. It was a scenario just to explore how you might design this situation. So I think we've still got a long way to go. I personally, when I first thought about the project, I thought I'd just go over the bridge, don't think twice of it. You get out of your car and go for a walk underneath it, you get a very different sense of what that structure is. It's really quite beautiful. Is it riddled with poison over the years that we're now leaching into the river? Do we know that? What do we think about that? Again, it's lacking that information that I think we need to sort of really get on top of. Because of course, from an instant reaction point of view, yes, it'd be lovely to keep it, highlights it, great images. I think we've got to find the function if we are going to keep it, or all of it, or a big part of it. How many people are going to go on there? What's it going to look like? We're clearly not New York. We might have 8 people an hour that walk across, I don't know. So how we're going to need to build in other bits of place activation and program to make that a really vibrant, great place to go. It can be done, but this will come at a big cost. Now, if government's prepared to fund that, fantastic. But I think before that decision's made, let's get some more data about the real engineering aspects of it. It's difficult to have a final opinion.
Minister, we've talked about the fact that Fremantle deserves something special as a gateway, and I'm wondering, with a budget of $230 million, what kind of something special could we achieve?
Honestly, I don't know. I think I don't know the answer to that, and that's why I wanted to come along here to show people that I'm interested to hear what people have got to say about the issue, and I'll do my best to represent that in the discussions. And as I said, if they don't feel that that representation or those views are being heard by Main Roads and the team that are put together. But I don't know that.
Do you have a view on whether we should retain the old bridge or definitely demolish it?
No, not really, but I understand that there are constraints, and I think probably you've heard about some of the reasons that the current bridge is problematic is because of the footings. One of the and they've done sure enough since this report, but one of the early reports talked about the risk to the bridge by a glancing blow by a passing vessel. And it was quite shocking when some of the engineering reports came out. But in any case, there's the current structure and the integrity of that, and then the issues that Russell just spoke about how many crossings are involved now underneath and what that looks like. So I can see that there are constraints, but I've got the council's view that as much as can be retained should be retained and make sense. It's beautiful wood, there's no doubt. It's lovely underneath, and it would be good to try and retain as much of that and to incorporate that as much as possible in the new design. And we need to take advice on that.
Thank you.
Could all the speakers be closer to the mic?
Sorry, everyone,
all of them,
please. Anthony, I want to ask you, because when we were speaking earlier, you were talking about how one of the things you would be able to advise us on tonight was what principles we could apply to looking at the plans that come from Main Roads when they are finally made public, what we should be thinking about when we look at those plans.
Well, I think we've already touched on quite a few of those. I think overall, when something's put down for community, one of the questions I'd be encouraging you to ask is whether or not you think the overall design reflects that idea of a gateway or a moment or a threshold or something that signifies the entry into the city of Fremantle, and how that might get represented in the form of the bridge. So I think that's one thing to consider initially. I think another important principle is probably to look at in a little bit more detail in terms of the way in which the road design is treated, like whether it's treated as a street or whether it's treated as a road highway. There's a bit of a default position that will be gone to, which will probably be the latter. And I think that what the Minister was saying about sweeping curves for 60km/h vehicles, I think that sort of thing can be scrutinised. How much asphalt is there and how wide are things? And what does that mean for the pedestrians and the people who are trying to get across? Because at the moment it's quite hostile in that location. So I think that sense of inviting people into the space who are not in cars and how that is treated is something that should be really scrutinised for this project. At the moment, when you cross on the bicycle, I think it's probably about 1 metre wide. It's really tight. It's really exposed, and I think there should be a bit more dignity applied to the people who are not in the cars. I think it should be a balance, more of a balance. So that's something that you can scrutinise in terms of the design of what is being preferenced here. I think, I mean, I don't want to go through the whole report because I feel like that might happen, but I think particularly in terms of its connection to the naval stores, the park that's on top of that, and even back into that kind of hinterland, there's a sort of potential connection right through there, across the bridge. And at the moment, again, that's really constrained, and it's not. There's no generosity to the pedestrian experience in any of that location. And with the rainbow sculpture, there's actually quite a lot of people there as well. So I think try and imagine that southern area as a bit of a place, and something that could sustain some of the things that Rebecca was talking about in terms of activity and inhabiting that space. So I mean, there's just a couple off the top of my head. I think it's really important that we look at it from a human perspective as opposed to a vehicular perspective, and that's the thing which I encourage you to guide to the proposal.
When you're looking at the plans, what are the things that will absolutely be that you wouldn't compromise on? Absolutely have to be there. I'm sure that you agree with a lot of the stuff that Anthony said, but did you want to add to anything?
I mean, number one is the location. Building it to the east, hard up against the North Bank residents, and driving it straight across into the naval stores at a huge intersection would be an awful outcome for place. So in my mind, that's a no-brainer. It's got to be built to the west, and the Fremantle Port have to concede. Beyond that, it is really those placemaking qualities. The foreshore, there's no connection in a walking sense from the northern side of the river to the southern side of the river. So you just can't cross in a safe, enjoyable manner. And so that's what I'll be looking for, is how are they managing to create a place out of the whole geographic area, not just a little bit around a stub of the Fremantle Traffic Bridge where it is, and not just with a concrete structure shoved into the naval stores and breaking up any sense of place that whole area can have in terms of arrival, in terms of gateway.
Yeah. Russell, you talked about the complexities of east-west as well. Do you want to add to that?
Look, I can share some of those concerns. And again, it's going back to the point that it's a very congested site, and I think we need to be looking for some simplicity in what comes out of the design. For me, one of the key things is connectivity. I guess we would all like to see something quite iconic and something that is sort of, brand Fremantle or something, but I kind of get over this iconic stuff pretty quick. For me, the place stuff that's been talked about is super important, and I think if you get really good connectivity, get really good bicycle connections, really good pedestrian connections, not just across, but then down to our foreshores. I don't know if you've walked along the foreshore, but either side. And the North Fremantle side feels like a private kind of enclave. There's no public domain, there's no public realm really there. The bank's all getting washed away. So to me, it might feel like detail, but I think getting that connectivity and place working is going to be what I'm going to be looking for, that there's those connections. Yes, if there's some iconic kind of gesture about Welcome Fremantle, great. I'm a little bit more interested in where Brendan's coming from and trying to integrate some of our watch up and our culture into the design process, not just some plaque that we sort of stick on it at the end to say this is Mitchell. Yeah, we kind of do that badly already. I think design has the opportunity here to be a lot bolder, and Fremantle can, if anywhere can do it, it should be Fremantle. So that's what
Brendan, do you want to follow up on that a little bit about what you see as being, you know, a proper respect being paid to Aboriginal heritage in that area?
Yeah, I mean, all Australian land has an Aboriginal history, so often it's become less that we get a proponent come and they've already built the thing or done the plan, and they sort of want the tick of approval, or they want to name, you know, Yagan Square or whatever it is, which has already been picked out of the hat. And it's, you know, that's not the way. It's not the way to do consultation. It's not the way I prefer to do consultation. And you know, Richard Wally's 6 seasons of consultation plan that he's done is an excellent piece. That's to begin right at the beginning. And you know, the river was for us. You know, it's to be enjoyed and to be looked after, and that's what everyone wants, I think. But you know, we do have all these threats. We've got, you know, rising seawater and flood. I've seen some maps of you know, 1.5 metres above what it is at the moment, and you'd be surprised you know, how many residents along the river are going to suffer. So it's we have to make sure that we're looking after you know, that riverine system, and it really is some of the work that the students of Notre Dame have done. If you get a chance, definitely have a look, because you know, they're opening it up and making use of the place, and it means something. And anyway, that's.
And what about big opportunities for naming and that kind of thing? Do you still care about that, even though that's only part of what can be done?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I care, but I care more about the longer term strategies like employment and but obviously naming the bridge would be is a really big piece, you know, and I'm sure it would be supported by just about every no I know.
Thank you. Minister, I had this question with the Westport process underway. Do you think knowing a second harbour is to be built in Kwinana would open up opportunities to rethink the location of the bridge, given that there is this conjecture about whether it should be west or east? Is it, like Russell alluded to the fact that there's a broader consideration around the port, and maybe that should be factored in?
I haven't heard that issue in the context of where the bridge is going to be, where this new traffic bridge is going to be. I haven't heard the kind of the Westport issues about whether freight moves down to Kwinana and when it moves down. Talked about that. I'm not saying it's not an issue, but I haven't heard that. Yeah.
Would anyone, Anthony, would you like to respond to that question at all? It was a question that was said to me. With the Westport process underway, would knowing that a second harbour is to be built in Kwinana open up opportunities to rethink the location of the bridge?
Well, I would have thought that it would.
Microphone?
I can't hear you.
Sorry. I would have thought initially when we were doing work in 2011, it was much more thinking very broadly about the future of the city, and the constraints of the port were, we sort of imagined scenarios where that wasn't the case, and that did open up different possibilities. So I think that there'd be no one that would argue that it wouldn't, but whether or not it does.
Yeah, it's all about the timing of
Can
everything.
I just also say, and I just want to pick up on Russell's point, was when I previously was talking about a project that celebrates the entry into Fremantle, and I wasn't trying to say that it needs to be something heroic, simply just doing what Russell said is making an incredibly well-connected and dignified experience might be enough. That might say Freo more than anything. So, yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. I wasn't imagining just something large.
Russell, since we are here at the invitation of DesignFreo, can we talk about how design can be incorporated in this and whether you believe that Main Roads is likely to have done such a thing?
I think we'll wait to see what comes out, but I guess from my own practice, 30 years working in urban design, it's all about multidisciplinary practice, and you hit those sweet spots when you've got people from different disciplines working together collaboratively, and what pops out at the end is seamless. You can't go, that's the engineering bit, that's the architectural bit that's been stuck on, and it's like a beautiful bridge could be designed by a really great engineer, and you just celebrate bridge design. I mean, look at the best bridges around the world, probably not an architect on site, but beautiful design. So to me, I'm kind of arguing against myself a bit there, but get the right process, get the right people around the design, then you should be able to get a really great outcome, rather than it sort of being engineered and then something happens to it, and then you ask the landscape architect to come along at the end and fix up the spaces left over, and landscape architects here, that happens to you all the time. So that real collaborative process from the beginning, bringing in cultural inputs as well from the beginning. These are the sort of design processes that I think generate excellence in design. So we look forward to that.
Anthony, I remember when we were talking earlier that you mentioned that you had some sense that more than usual consideration was being given to design and the sort of sense of place with this bridge. Are you able to elaborate on that at all?
Well, I think the fact that we were invited to come and prepare some information to help with the process was encouraging, but that was more of an advisory role. That wasn't involved in this kind of collaborative design process, and I agree with Russell wholeheartedly that collaboration is the key to enduring and successful projects, particularly projects which will endure for possibly 100 years when we think about projects of this significance. So I understand that the input has been given, but as to what's been done with that, I remain in a similar position to everyone here tonight in terms of how effective or how much is that translated into the process.
Thank you. I did email Main Roads to ask them some questions and was asked to email my questions. So I emailed the question and got a very long response. I don't know, how does everyone feel about hearing the response that I got from Main Roads? Is that of interest, to get a general sense? Yep. So I just simply asked what community consultation Main Roads is obliged to do before presenting a plan to the community, and if in fact that obligation has been carried out. And the response that I got said, following discussions with the project team, we advise the following. Main Roads has had many detailed conversations over a number of years with stakeholders, interest groups and the community about the need to replace the Fremantle Traffic Bridge, and we are committed to continuing those conversations over the next 18 months. The project is being and will continue to be reviewed by both the State Design Review Panel and the Heritage Council, and both emphasise the need for community consultation as part of the process. In addition to consultation, an enormous amount of work still needs to be done to design the crossings. This includes geotechnical and environmental investigations, as well as heritage and urban landscape and design planning. Sounds good. We encourage everyone to visit the webpage and subscribe for project updates for the latest information on how you can get involved. With regard to the existing bridge, Main Roads has been in discussions with the City of Fremantle to retain a portion of the existing traffic bridge on the southern embankment for potential future activation opportunities, and this will also be a wider conversation with the community. Then they added a whole bunch of notes, which I can make this available to you via DesignFreo. And then at the end it says, we look forward to following the conversation of DesignFreo and engaging as the community consultation gets underway, including seeking community involvement on determining the design and heritage priorities for the project. We plan to start community consultation shortly and will welcome any assistance DesignFreo could provide in sharing information and encouraging the community to be involved in shaping the development and design of the Swan River Crossings project over the coming months and ultimately through to construction and beyond. Can I get a sense of how everyone feels about that? So, yeah, in a sec, I think that would be a very good idea because I'm very conscious that we've gone over the time that I've said. Is there any just like final words, Rebecca? Would you like to say something before we go to questions, or are you happy to start fielding questions? Okay, anyone? All right, yes, a question. Do we have a roving mic by any chance, or is that not happening?
That statement by Main Roads worries me tremendously because it indicates that there's already a preordained decision that the entire bridge will not be retained. And it seems to me, let's make three observations. Clearly there is a problem with repair and maintenance of the old bridge, but that will be largely, or to a very significant extent, affected by the fact that it's being used by heavy vehicular traffic. If you take the traffic away, pension the bridge off so that it's used for pedestrian, bike, tapas, bars, events, make it the Highline thing that's been talked about. You won't need the same degree, I feel, I'm not an engineer, but I suspect you won't need the same degree of repair and maintenance to the supporting beams and pylons. And secondly, it seems to me to be blindingly obvious that if you did what they did with the Narrows Bridge to the Stirling Bridge, you've solved your problem. Just round it, double the width of the thing, and you may well have that flyover somewhere north of North Freo, and it all feeds across the Stirling Bridge and then into Freo. You don't have to have a second vehicular bridge. It can be a pedestrian bridge. And the third thing is that in relation to the pylons in the water, if they are a real problem, or I know there's pylons supporting the rail bridge anyway, well, you can possibly re-engineer it with some substantial steel arch beams that will hold up and get rid of the pylons. So my vote is, look seriously at keeping it, but not as a vehicular bridge.
Would any of the panellists like to respond to that before we go to another question?
I really agree that email from Main Roads really concerns me. And I know, it's common knowledge that they're going out to a design and contract consultancy at the moment, so that the time is really narrowing and we're getting quite a design scope. The Herald posted a photo from 2003 of a dotted line where the bridge was supposed to get, and it looks like after consultation and Audrick's input, we're going to get the same outcome after 17 years. That's pretty terrible, and very disappointing.
Anyone else? Yes.
Can I just make a comment about whether you decide to just duplicate or add to the Stirling Bridge instead of having a new traffic bridge where it is? I think that would be a really a great concern for many in Fremantle, because I think one of the concerns is if you take the traffic away and just go down the Stirling Bridge, you actually run the risk of diverting traffic away from the centre of Fremantle. And so I just think there probably want to be a bit of thought about whether that was the alternative. I don't know that the city would support that.
Russell, did you want to say anything?
Look, I think you need to do some traffic modelling around that. My gut feeling is you're going to need a second bridge. We've seen some data on traffic volumes on Stirling Bridge. We've also heard long-term plans Stirling Bridge would be duplicated, not from 4 to 8, but at least from 4 to 6. So it shows some indication of the volumes that it's already taking. I can't help feeling that half the reason why the North Fremantle town site is actually there is because of the bridge. Originally, it was the road that went up to Perth, and you had a town site on the north bank. To me, it's not so much bridge or no bridge, it's the nature of the bridge. If it is a fast road, then obviously it's not going to be any good, and you don't want to be pouring any more traffic into North Fremantle than that's currently there. But to have access to North Fremantle and to Stirling Highway, I don't see as a major problem, but not at the expense of North Fremantle. For me, one of the key things would be looking at the place around North Fremantle and protecting that at all costs. To me, I'll be going really hard on that stuff. And to say no more cars through there. But yeah, I think a bridge there isn't necessarily an equal link.
Oh, so many hands. Layla, this gentleman had his hand. You've got a question? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Grant, that was my name. And thank you, Brendan, for tonight. I'm a little bit disturbed about this evening's discussions, and I'm trying to get my blood pressure down here. But as a resident of North Freo, and one that has appreciated all the hard work from that community, Anne Foreman, Jerry Gill, Councillor Sullivan and so forth, there's an enormous heritage of intellectual rigour on how the river performs, and North Fremantle in particular performs as a community and as a place. And with due respect, I think the new Old Bridge project is a bit of a furphy, sorry, and I think, and I'll wait for Anne's contributions tonight, I think we're being forced down a funnel here. And for many North Fremantle residents, we've kind of been waiting for it. We knew it was coming. And so the big issue is, of course, the port. That's the great pressure on a lot of things North Fremantle. So I would encourage the Minister to take the Premier out to lunch and, if I may quote a councillor from this afternoon, hit the pause button, please. Because these questions are raising big urban planning, community design issues. And we don't need a bridge to hit us across the baseline. We don't. We've got to take a step back and appreciate what that river landscape is all about. The Noongar design principles and Dr. Wally's greater vision of how land planning can occur in this part of the world is critical. I don't think any bit of public art or naming should embarrass that process.
Layla, the lady just in the centre here.
Thank you. Listening to that conversation about having a bridge that would be designed as a wonderful entrance to Fremantle. I don't live in North Fremantle, but I thought actually Fremantle begins in North Fremantle, and whatever we do, we have to have crossings that do make that connection. And I'm concerned that whatever bridge we get will probably not fully take that into consideration. So I support what you're saying.
Yes, Jenny.
Hi, my name is Connor. I represent a grassroots group called Freo Residents for Beach Street Station. My question's for Simone, but I'd like to hear from the other panellists if they have any thoughts of their own. The replacement of the Freo Traffic Bridge presents a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reshape the gateway to Fremantle, an opportunity in which it would be remiss if passenger rail was not given equal consideration to other forms of transport. A new station on the southern bank of the river at Beach Street between Fremantle and North Fremantle stations could become an integral part of this new gateway to Fremantle. Is the state government exploring the integration of passenger rail infrastructure into the Fremantle Traffic Bridge Master Plan? And more specifically, would the government be open to exploring the construction of a new station at Beach Street?
No one has raised that with me before, I have to say, about the new station, so I probably have to think about it. And stations, look, I would really just have to think about that. I don't see any reason why some of those issues can't be incorporated or the questions asked of main roads and considered during the process. Stations in themselves all cost money. All of those things take resources, so then, that might be a consideration. But yeah, I'm happy to think about it, and I'm open to any of the issues I've heard tonight. And as I've said before, if they're not being properly considered by main roads, then they should be. That's all I can undertake to do.
Thank you. In the centre, just the gentleman right in the centre, Leila, with his hand up. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Michael Barker. I came really interested in the topic tonight, and I don't feel as if I'm much further advanced than I was before I came, and that's because I'd like to hear from main roads. I really need to know more. Anthony's made the point, and Russell's made the point, and they're well-informed people. We should be inviting them to present.
Oh, they were invited.
I know they were invited. But how do you have a conversation like this in the community without that information? We have to shoot each other, really. I didn't quite catch what the Minister said at the beginning about how they're going to consult. I thought she said dropping meetings.
So, look, I agree. I think main roads does need to come and talk to people about what their constraints are. What does the plan look like, and what are some of the parameters of the project? And people might agree with them or not agree with them, but at least have that information. And so main roads or myself didn't set tonight. This was set. And as I said at the beginning, I was cautious about coming along because I can't represent main roads or any of the engineering considerations, but I wanted to hear what people had to say. So I agree, main roads needs to get out now, and I've said that to the Minister very clearly.
I'll just make a supplementary point, because I agreed with the first speaker when he commented on the main roads letter. It raises more questions than it answers, and I've seen a lot of letters like that over time. They need to come down and tell us what their dream is. They need to tell us what Anthony was telling us about the possibilities. Have they taken them into account? And draw us into the conversation now, not get a few responses to a few things.